Beneath the cliff hung a massive block of concrete. Raven Peak Lodge, 1999. Dust floated over overturned chairs, frozen plates still set for guests who never came. Then it hit him, dried blood on the wall, fresh footprints in the dust, and a hoarse, distorted laugh echoing from below. His flashlight flickered, landing on a message scrawled in trembling black paint. Don't wake it. If that moment sent chills down your spine, share this story, leave a comment, and subscribe for more haunting tales of faith, fear, and redemption. Snow fell in relentless waves, swallowing the mountain trail until even footprints vanished. The Wind River Range stretched wide and merciless, its peaks sharp as broken glass beneath a gray sky. Jack Turner tightened the strap of his backpack, breath visible in the biting cold. In his 40s, he was broad-shouldered but weary, his jaw shadowed with stubble, and his eyes an iron gray that had seen too many battlefields. Years in the Marines had carved him into a man who trusted silence more than words. At his side, padded Shadow, a 6-year-old German shepherd with thick black and white fur, calm amber eyes, and the disciplined gait of a trained military dog. Together they moved through the storm, two survivors bound by loyalty and ghosts. Jack had been searching for a missing survey team for 3 days, following faint radio beacons that blinked and died one after another. He had seen avalanches, wrecked gear, and animal tracks, but no people. When the fog thinned, he stopped dead. Suspended beneath the cliff ahead was something no map had mentioned, a vast concrete structure clinging to the rock face like a spider's web. Jagged balconies jutted upside down, railings rusted to the color of dried blood, windows shattered and glinting faintly in the dim light. It looked both human and wrong, as though gravity itself had turned against it. He descended toward it carefully, his boots cracking the frozen crust of snow. Up close, the structure loomed monstrous. A faded sign, barely visible through the frost, read, Raven Peak Lodge, 1999. Jack frowned. The project had never opened, he remembered vaguely. Something about bankruptcy or a landslide, but the dates didn't make sense. The rebar was still clean in places, the paint on the steel too fresh for a ruin of 25 years. He found a stairway of broken stone leading downward into Shadow. Shadow sniffed the air, ears twitching, a low rumble in his throat. "Easy," Jack murmured, though unease crawled up his spine. The stairway ended at a half-sunken door of heavy metal. He brushed away ice, revealing the outline of a corporate logo half erased by time. When he pushed, the hinges screamed, the echo vanishing into the hollow dark beyond. Inside smelled of metal and mildew. His flashlight cut a thin beam across the lobby. Dust sheets over furniture, crates stamped, imported from Italy, chandeliers still wrapped in plastic. On the wall hung a grand opening banner. May 1999. It swayed gently, though there was no wind. The air itself seemed to breathe. Jack's heart thudded slower, heavier. "Someone's been here," he whispered. Shadow answered with a soft growl. As he explored further, his beam caught something on the floor, a trail of reddish smears leading toward the main hall. He crouched. The stains were old, but the edges hadn't frozen, as if the blood had thawed recently. Nearby, boot prints crossed the dust, large, distinct, and fresh. The survey team couldn't have made them. They wore smaller, lighter gear. Jack's pulse kicked up. His training returned instantly. Observe, measure, anticipate. "We're not alone," he said under his breath. Shadow's fur bristled, hackles high. A sudden metallic clang echoed from below, like a dropped pipe. The sound repeated once, twice, then silence. He followed it down a narrow service corridor lined with cracked mirrors. Every few steps his light flickered, showing reflections that seemed delayed by a heartbeat. The air grew colder, thick with the smell of ozone. At the corridor's end, he found a maintenance door ajar. On the inside surface, written in black paint, were words that looked frantic, smeared by fingers. "Don't wake it." The letters dripped as if still wet. Jack stared at them, his breath fogging the metal. His gut tightened. Military instinct told him to turn back, but something deeper, the same stubborn need that had kept him alive in war, urged him forward. He entered a vast dining hall. Tables stood set with silverware dulled by time. Wine bottles lay unopened, labels pristine. On one of them he saw fingerprints in the dust, recent ones. Then came a sound that did not belong to wind or metal, a faint, distorted chuckle, rising and falling like static. Shadow barked sharply, turning in circles, unsure where it came from. "Show yourself!" Jack shouted, voice echoing through the hall. The laughter stopped. A chandelier overhead creaked. For a moment he saw a flicker of movement on the mezzanine, a dark silhouette, tall, motionless, watching. The flashlight wavered, then died. In the darkness he heard something drag across the floor, a slow scrape like steel over stone. Jack's muscles coiled, knife ready, breath measured. "You've survived worse," he told himself, though his voice trembled. Shadow's growl deepened, then turned into a long, mournful howl that filled the lodge and shivered the air. When the light flickered back to life, the silhouette was gone. On the wall behind him, where there had been nothing before, words now sprawled across the plaster in dark paint. "Welcome back." Jack stepped back, heart pounding. His mind raced through every rational explanation, wind, hallucination, fatigue, but none fit. Outside, the storm howled through broken glass like a choir of whispers. He glanced down at Shadow, whose ears twitched toward the lower floors, and felt the weight of inevitability press down on him. "We started this," he muttered. "We finish it." He looked once more at the ancient banner trembling in invisible wind. Somewhere beneath him, something stirred, mechanical, alive. And for the first time in years, the soldier felt genuine fear. The temperature dropped as Jack descended the narrow service stairwell, each step groaning under his boots. The beam of his flashlight shook slightly, throwing jagged shadows across the cracked concrete. Dust spiraled in the air like breath from something sleeping too long. Shadow padded ahead, fur bristling, every movement tense. Jack could feel the pressure building in his chest, the same quiet dread he had known before combat ambushes. Yet this was worse. In war, the enemy was alive. Here, he wasn't sure what he was fighting. The lower floor opened into a storage hall littered with overturned carts and sealed crates. The smell of rust, oil, and something faintly sweet, decay softened by time, hung in the air. He crouched by a line of old shipping labels, tracing the words with his gloved hand. Helios Dynamics. Authorized material. The name scraped at his memory. He had seen it before, printed on damaged drones in Afghanistan, experimental tech divisions, ghost companies funding projects no one admitted existed. What the hell were they doing here? He muttered. Shadow suddenly froze, ears perked. A low growl rumbled from his chest. Jack turned his light toward the far wall and stopped breathing. There, slumped against a support beam, sat the remains of a man. The body was almost mummified by cold and time, skin drawn tight against bone, uniform faded to gray. A maintenance badge still clung to the jacket, its letters barely legible. Daniel Holt, site caretaker. His head tilted downward as if still asleep. Jack knelt, pulling the small, brittle notebook from Holt's lap. The last page bore words etched with shaking hands. "They told me to watch this place for a few weeks. It's been 6 months. The lodge doesn't want to be left alone." A quiet click broke the silence. Jack's flashlight flickered twice. From the corner, an ancient radio resting on a metal shelf crackled to life, coughing static. Then a male voice, calm, mechanical, spoke through it. "Experiment Aero 7 initiated again. Welcome back." Jack's pulse jumped. He swung his light toward the sound, but the radio was unplugged. Dust coated the cord, the socket corroded black. "No way," he whispered. Shadow barked, pacing in circles. Then came a deep, low vibration that rippled through the floor like a distant heartbeat. The air filled with the groan of shifting steel. One of the large blast doors at the far end of the hall shuddered, bolts snapping loose as it began to open on its own. Jack drew his combat knife, the motion automatic, instinctual. The vibration intensified, shaking the light fixtures. He grabbed Shadow by the collar and backed toward the stairwell, but the door behind him had jammed shut. The handle refused to move, sealed by pressure or something unseen. Dust rained from the ceiling. A sound followed, the soft scrape of footsteps echoing from the newly opened corridor ahead. They weren't human steps, not quite. Too rhythmic, too heavy, too measured. Jack switched off his light, crouching low, relying on Shadow's senses. The dog's ears twitched, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Then the sound stopped. From within the darkness came a voice. Not through the radio this time, but close, whispering through the hall like breath over glass. "You shouldn't have come back." Jack tensed. "Who's there?" Silence answered. Then faint movement again, the drag of metal. He forced himself to move forward, step by step, his knife raised. The corridor beyond was lined with broken control panels, every screen flickering weakly. On one, a red error message pulsed. "Resonance. Chamber reboot. Phase 1. Jack didn't know what it meant, but the name Helios burned in his head like a warning. He had seen how that company erased their failures, entire facilities gone overnight. He reached a small operations room and found another body slumped in a chair, the uniform cleaner, newer. This man wasn't decades old, maybe dead a few months. His face was thin, hollow-eyed, and his hands were curled tightly around a pistol. The side of the weapon was rusted, the barrel empty. Jack noticed the broken badge still clipped to his chest. G. Wallace, Security. On the wall beside him was a half-torn evacuation order. Only 3 words remained legible. "Containment breached. Evacuate surface." Jack stepped back, the dread now crawling up his throat. "This wasn't an accident," he said under his breath. He turned toward Shadow, only to find the dog staring intently at the floor vent. Something moved inside it, slow and wet. A hiss of air escaped, like breathing through metal. Then a thud. The vent cover snapped open and slammed against the wall. Jack lunged, pulling Shadow back as a gust of freezing air burst out carrying dust and the faint scent of blood. Nothing emerged, yet the echo of motion retreated into the deeper corridors. The lodge was awake now. Every corridor seemed to hum with static energy, old systems flickering alive. Alarms blinked red, one after another, as if the building remembered what it once was, and wanted to finish what it had started. Jack's military instincts screamed for him to retreat, but another voice in his mind whispered differently. "If you run now, you'll never know what happened here, and they'll never be found." He looked at Holt's body one last time. The caretaker's hollow eyes seemed to watch him, almost pleading. Jack whispered, "I'll finish what you couldn't," then turned toward the yawning dark where the blast door had opened. The air inside pulsed like the breath of a sleeping giant. He and Shadow stepped forward together, swallowed by the silence below. The emergency lights flickered awake, pulsing red along the ceiling like a heartbeat. Jack shielded his eyes as the sudden glow painted the corridor in blood-colored light. Dust drifted in thin spirals. The generators, long silent, coughed themselves back to life somewhere in the lower levels. He felt the faint vibration through his boots, rhythmic and deliberate. It was as if the lodge itself had begun breathing again. Shadow whimpered softly, tail low, his ears twitching toward the direction of the hum. Jack stepped into a smaller maintenance office, branching off the main hall. The air here was warmer, faintly metallic. Papers were scattered across the desk, brittle from age. A cracked coffee mug still bore the faded logo of Helios Dynamics. On the wall hung an access map marked Restricted Research Wing. But it was the worn, leather-bound journal lying beneath a lamp that drew Jack's attention. The handwriting on the cover was unmistakable. D. Holt. He sat, brushing off the dust. The first pages described weather patterns, structural checks, and inventory lists, mundane details of a man clinging to routine. But gradually the tone shifted. Holt's words grew erratic, paranoid, desperate. They told me it was temporary. Watch the equipment, maintain the power grid, don't enter the lower chambers. But the hum never stopped. Even when the power failed, it kept going beneath the floors. Jack turned the page. Helios wanted to erase fear, to isolate it from the brain's chemistry. They called it resonance therapy. Sound waves calibrated to reach emotional frequencies, the place between panic and faith. But something went wrong. The frequencies started responding on their own. They said it was feedback, but I heard voices in the vibrations, the voices of people who had already left. Jack exhaled slowly, his pulse steady but cold. "You created a monster out of sound," he murmured. The next entry was nearly illegible, lines smudged as though written in trembling haste. "I saw her today, the woman from the research team, red hair, the architect's assistant. She shouldn't be here. She said the experiment succeeded, but she wasn't speaking like herself. Her mouth moved, but the sound came from the walls." Jack frowned. Red hair? He tucked the detail away, not yet knowing its meaning. Then came the last entry, scrawled across 2 pages, in uneven strokes. "They wanted to kill fear, but fear learned to live without them. The lodge is its body now. Every beam, every echo carries its pulse. I can't turn it off. I can't leave. If anyone finds this, burn it down before it wakes again." The words hit Jack harder than he expected. He felt the familiar weight of guilt, a soldier's reflex, the echo of all the warnings ignored before disaster struck. He knew what it was like to be left behind with orders that no longer made sense. For a long moment he sat in silence, listening to the low hum beneath the floor. It was subtle, yet undeniably there, like a machine buried deep inside the rock. Suddenly the light above him flared white. The old lamp sputtered and then stabilized, humming loudly. Then every light in the corridor outside came alive at once, cascading down the hall like a sequence reactivating after decades of dormancy. A mechanical click followed, a heavy relay switching on. Jack rose from the chair, grabbing the journal. Shadow began to bark, sharp and panicked, staring at the ceiling. Jack looked up. The sound coming from above was like footsteps, hundreds of them, moving in perfect synchronization, but there was no vibration, no dustfall, just noise, impossibly layered. "Stay," he whispered, aiming his flashlight upward. The ceiling panels rippled faintly, as though pressure was building beneath them. Then silence. The hum stopped. For a single breath, everything held still. Jack almost believed it was over until his light caught something on the far wall. A section of plaster had cracked open, revealing the raw concrete underneath. Embedded in it, half concealed by dust, was a human handprint, fresh, pink, and glistening wet. Jack froze, instinct screaming. He knelt closer. The ridges and pores were intact, the blood still bright at the edges. Whoever, or whatever, had left it hadn't been dead for long. Shadow growled, his hackles up, eyes fixed on the wall. Jack backed away slowly, forcing his breath to stay calm. The silence deepened until he could hear his own pulse. Then came a faint sound, like whispering through a vent. Words formed and faded, impossible to pinpoint. He caught only fragments. "Find the chamber. Set us free." Jack's throat tightened. He didn't believe in ghosts, not really. But this place was something else, something between science and faith, where sound carried more than echoes. He gripped Holt's journal, the leather cold and stiff. "You wanted me to burn it down," he said under his breath, "but first I need to know what I'm burning." He turned off the lamp, grabbed his gear, and looked toward the deeper corridors where the red warning lights pulsed faintly, like the glow of veins. Whatever Helios had buried here wasn't finished. He glanced down at Shadow, who met his gaze with silent resolve. "We go deeper," Jack said quietly. "Let's find the chamber." Together they disappeared into the trembling dark. The corridor opened into what had once been the control center of Raven Peak Lodge. Rows of consoles curved along the walls, their surfaces coated in frost and age. Dead monitors blinked sporadically, pulsing with faint blue light like tired eyes, struggling to stay awake. Jack swept his flashlight across the room. On the far wall hung a massive blueprint sealed under cracked glass, its edges curled. Written in neat French cursive were the words, "Projet Moreau, Raven Peak Resonance Layout, Phase 3. Jack wiped the dust away and stared. Every floor, every balcony, every curved chamber had been designed to funnel sound, to channel it into a single subterranean point labeled Resonance Chamber. He turned toward the desk below it. Amid broken glass and stacks of mildewed paper sat an envelope, wax seal still intact. Inside was a letter, the handwriting elegant and steady. Adrian Moreau. The name triggered something faint in his memory. An avant-garde architect from Lyon, once praised as a genius, later disgraced when several of his projects were linked to psychological accidents. Jack read the letter slowly. "We do not build hotels. We build thresholds. The human mind fears the void. My design gives shape to that fear. If one crosses through and remains whole, he will find truth. But if he fails, the structure will carry his fear in his place. It will live for him." Jack let the paper drop slightly. "So that's what you did," he muttered. "You turned a building into a confession." He studied the margins, noting rough sketches, spirals of sound waves converging like fingerprints. Beneath them, a signature. "For Elise?" The name made him pause. "Your granddaughter," he murmured. Behind him, a floorboard creaked. He turned instantly, flashlight raised, knife ready. Standing in the doorway was a woman, tall, mid-30s, with a sharp, angular face and red hair pulled into a loose braid streaked with silver. Her features were pale from the cold, but her eyes, a light amber, burned with clarity and grief. She wore a heavy expedition jacket over faded cargo pants, boots caked in snow, and a satchel strapped across her chest. A holstered pistol rested against her hip, though her hand wasn't on it yet. "You shouldn't be here," she said evenly, her voice carrying both fatigue and authority. "Neither should you," Jack replied, knife still lowered, but ready. "Who are you?" "Elise Moreau," she said. "This place belongs to my family, or what's left of it." The name confirmed his suspicion. Jack straightened slightly, but didn't relax. "Adrian's granddaughter," he said. "You're the one he built this for." Her gaze softened for just a second. "He built it for everyone. They turned it into something else." She stepped closer, light from the doorway glancing off her hair. "You've read his letter, haven't you?" "I did," Jack answered. "He talked about crossing thresholds, about fear." She nodded. Helios Dynamics twisted his design. The resonance chamber was supposed to help people face trauma safely. They changed it, tried to use the frequency to erase fear entirely. They killed him when he tried to stop them. Jack studied her face. There was no tremor in her voice, no deceit, but the way she clutched the satchel at her side told him something more. Desperation. "You came back to finish what they started?" he asked. "No." She took a step forward, unzipping the satchel. Inside lay a small control device, metallic, palm-sized, its screen cracked but functional. "I came to prove it works, to clear my father's and grandfather's names. They said their design killed people. I'll show it can save them." "That device," Jack said quietly, "it reactivates the chamber." "Yes?" She raised her chin. "I've repaired the core. The systems woke when you entered. The building knows someone's here. I can stabilize it before it resets." Jack moved closer, eyes narrowing. "You don't stabilize something like this. You bury it." For the first time, her composure cracked. "You think fear can just be buried? You've seen war, haven't you? Men screaming, breaking. You can't bury what's inside them. My grandfather believed fear was holy. It reminded us we were alive. Helios called it a disease. They killed him for that belief." Jack exhaled, the edge in his tone softening. "I know what it's like to lose faith, but playing God doesn't bring them back." A low rumble cut through their argument, the hum of machinery deeper underground. Elise's head snapped toward the sound. "It's already starting," she whispered. "The resonance chamber. It's rebooting itself." She pulled a small pistol from her side, more out of fear than threat. "If you try to stop me, I'll shoot the control panel before you destroy it." Jack's eyes met hers, steel and amber locked in silent defiance. "You'll get yourself killed," he said. "Maybe," she replied, voice trembling now. "But at least I'll know I didn't run away from what they built." Somewhere below, the floor vibrated again, lights flickering in slow rhythm. The hum grew louder, almost like a heartbeat answering its own echo. Shadow barked once, sharp and urgent, breaking the silence between them. Jack lowered his knife slightly, but didn't turn away from her. "Then we'd better find out what's waking up," he said. The air grew heavy, pulsing with invisible waves. In the half-light, the two of them stood like reflections of opposing faith. One built from reason, the other from redemption, both staring into the abyss that waited below. The floor trembled beneath them as Elise slammed the control panel's switch. The hum that had haunted the lodge since his arrival rose into a deafening roar. Red emergency lights ignited across the chamber walls, spinning shadows through the room. Jack covered his ears as the pitch climbed beyond human tolerance, the sound vibrating through his bones. The air thickened, alive, electric, every surface trembling as though it remembered pain. Shadow barked wildly, retreating behind a console, hackles raised, teeth bared. Elise stood at the central terminal, her eyes wide, her face illuminated by flickering crimson light. Jack lunged toward her. "Turn it off, Elise. You don't know what you're doing." She spun around, her braid whipping across her shoulder, and shouted over the resonance. "You don't understand. These aren't ghosts. They're trapped frequencies. People who died here, their minds captured when the chamber failed. I can free them." The noise intensified, voices forming within the waves. Human voices, screaming, crying, overlapping in terror and confusion. Jack staggered, clutching his head. "That's not freedom," he shouted. "That's a graveyard screaming through steel." Elise's hands trembled over the controls. Tears streaked her dust-covered face. "I can't stop it now. It's responding to itself. If I shut it down, they'll be lost forever." Her voice cracked, half a sob. "My father's voice is in there. He was part of the final test. Don't you hear him?" The walls pulsed like a living organ, streaked with glowing veins of light. Machinery deep below rumbled, gears shifting as the structure itself seemed to awaken. Jack moved closer, trying to reach her. "You're not saving them. You're feeding it. It feeds on fear, Elise. That's what your grandfather warned about. She turned, pistol trembling in her hand. I can still make it right. Shadow barked sharply and stepped between them, muscles tense. The German shepherd's chest heaved as he growled low, warning them both. Jack raised his hand slowly, his voice calm despite the quake under his feet. Put the gun down! But the chamber screamed again, and Elise flinched. The gun fired. The bullet ricocheted off the concrete wall, striking a rusted conduit. Sparks erupted in a blinding flash, and a chain of explosions tore across the ceiling. Electricity raced along the cables like veins igniting. Smoke filled the air as panels shattered and metal shrieked. Jack dove, dragging Elise to the floor. Shadow barked frantically, circling them. Sparks rained down like molten hail. From the overhead speakers, the voices twisted, merging into something coherent. A man's voice, rough but familiar. Jack, if you can hear me, don't let them restart it. Burn it. Promise me, brother. Jack froze. His stomach dropped. The voice, raspy, strained, belonged to Tom Bennett, his old unit partner who had gone missing years ago. Elise looked up at him, face pale, horror dawning. That's someone from your team? Jack's hands tightened around the hilt of his knife. He was security here. They used him in the test. His throat constricted. They turned them into this. The walls throbbed again. The sound waves shifted pitch, almost pleading, hundreds of faint whispers layering into one desperate phrase. Let us rest. Elise's tears fell silently as she shook her head. No, I can't lose them again. Jack took a slow breath, stepping forward as the building groaned. You already did, he said softly. Now let them go. He reached for the main breaker, gripping the handle with both hands. Elise tried to move toward him, but Shadow blocked her, growling until she froze. Their eyes met, his filled with resolve, hers with grief. He pulled the lever. The lights exploded in a flare of white, then went black. The resonance collapsed into silence, leaving only the echo of a long, fading sigh, half wind, half voices dissolving into peace. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, faintly, the mountain seemed to breathe again, calm and still. Jack knelt beside the shattered console, his pulse slowing. Elise sat on the floor, hands covering her face, sobbing quietly. Smoke drifted upward, curling like ghosts finally freed. Shadow nudged Jack's arm with his muzzle, eyes soft, exhausted. Jack whispered, It's over, though he wasn't sure if he meant for her, for the dead, or for himself. The floor was cracking beneath their feet. The resonance chamber pulsed with violent red light, each heartbeat of the machine louder than the last. Steam hissed from ruptured pipes, mingling with the metallic tang of ozone. Jack pulled Elise to her feet, gripping her arm as sparks rained from the ceiling. The control console had melted into slag, and the walls glowed faintly as if the structure itself were alive, breathing, furious. Elise's face was streaked with soot and tears. Her braid had come loose, wild strands of copper hair sticking to her damp skin. I just wanted to prove they weren't monsters, she shouted over the roar. My grandfather, my father, they weren't wrong. Jack turned toward her, his eyes reflecting the chaos around them. They weren't evil, Elise, but they were wrong. They thought they could cure fear, play God. Look where it led. A deep groan rumbled through the foundations. The mountain seemed to shudder, the floor heaving beneath them as cracks spidered across the walls. Shadow barked sharply, his claws scraping against the concrete, ears flat. We need to move, Jack yelled. He shoved Elise toward the access tunnel, throwing his pack onto his shoulder. The explosion pack inside it rattled softly, a grim reminder of the last resort he'd planned from the moment he stepped inside this nightmare. They ran through the corridor as the air pulsed with waves of sound, each one stronger, more human. The echoes that followed were not mechanical. They were voices. Dozens, hundreds of them, layered into a single wail that made the metal tremble. Elise stopped, turning toward the sound. "Listen, they're not angry. They're calling for help." Jack grabbed her wrist, forcing her to face him. "They're dying again, Elise, and if you stay, you'll die with them." She hesitated, her eyes wide with grief and defiance. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Fear isn't the enemy, it's proof of the soul." Jack's jaw tightened. Then maybe it's time to let the soul rest. He reached into his pack and pulled out the detonator, a small black device scratched from years of service. His thumb hovered over the trigger. The air shimmered with heat and light as the resonance chamber's core swelled behind them, glowing red like a sun trapped underground. The sound was unbearable now, a distorted chorus of screams rising toward a single pitch. "Jack, no!" Elise cried. "You'll destroy everything." "That's the point." He slung his arm around her shoulders, dragging her toward the maintenance shaft. "Move!" he barked, voice raw. Shadow leapt ahead, tail low, guiding them toward the exit as the floor began to collapse in waves. Panels tore free, beams fell like dying giants. The light reached a fever pitch. For an instant, Jack could see the outline of faces, hundreds of them, shifting within the concrete walls, their mouths open in silent cries. Then, through the cacophony, one voice cut clear, Tom Bennett's again, faint but calm this time. "Goodbye, Jack. You did the right thing." Jack closed his eyes. "I hope so," he murmured, and pressed the trigger. The explosion hit like thunder. A shockwave of red light burst outward, swallowing the chamber. Jack felt himself lifted, weightless for a moment before the air turned to fire. He threw himself over Elise and Shadow, shielding them as concrete rained from above. The world roared, then collapsed inward on itself. From outside the cliff face, the mountain erupted. Snow and flame mingled in a single blinding surge, a red bloom beneath the white storm. The sound rolled down the valley like a god's final breath. When it was over, silence returned, pure, absolute, eternal. Jack lay half buried in the snow, coughing smoke. The sky above was streaked with orange where the explosion had torn through the clouds. Elise stirred beside him, bruised but alive. Shadow limped over, pressing his muzzle into Jack's shoulder. Jack stared at the distant plume of smoke rising from the mountain and whispered, "It's done." Elise followed his gaze, tears glinting in her eyes. "They're free now?" she said softly. Jack nodded. "And so are we." The morning was clear. Pale blue stretched endlessly above the Wind River Range. Snow still covered the cliffs, but spring had softened its edge, the kind of morning when the mountains seemed almost merciful. Jack Turner climbed the final ridge alone, his breath rising in white curls. His red and black flannel shirt flapped in the thin air, worn and faded now, yet still the same one he had worn the day the mountain fell. Beside him trotted Shadow, slower than before, his black and white coat streaked with gray around the muzzle. The dog's steps were careful, deliberate, his loyalty undimmed by time. Jack stopped at the precipice. Below lay only rubble, an ocean of gray stone and twisted rebar where Raven Peak Lodge had once clung to the cliffside. He crouched and brushed the frost from a bent piece of metal. The engraved letters, though half erased, were still visible. Bennett T. He swallowed hard, the cold biting deeper than the wind. "You're home now, buddy," he murmured. For a long moment he simply stood there, the silence vast and clean. The scars of the explosion had faded, new snow had fallen, erasing the burns, the brokenness. Nature had reclaimed what man had corrupted. Yet Jack could still feel the echo of it all, the hum in the earth, faint and deep, like the memory of a heartbeat long gone. He wasn't sure if it was real or just his mind replaying the past. Either way, it didn't frighten him anymore. Elise had vanished after the collapse. One report claimed she was seen in Geneva, another in Montreal, teaching sound theory under a different name. Jack didn't try to find her. Some ghosts deserved distance. He hoped she had found peace, just as he was trying to. He had sent a letter months ago, never answered, signed only with 3 words. "They're free now." Shadow let out a soft whine and sat beside him, pressing his flank against Jack's leg. Jack smiled faintly and knelt, running his calloused hand through the dog's fur. "You did good, partner," he whispered. The wind rose slightly, tugging at his hair, carrying the scent of pine and thawing earth. It was gentle, almost kind. He removed his glove and placed his hand on a flat stone covered in snow. "Lord," his voice was quiet, raw, "if redemption still exists, let it start here." The words drifted away, swallowed by the vastness. He wasn't sure if anyone or anything was listening. But then, from somewhere far down the valley, a faint sound rode the wind. It wasn't quite a voice, not quite an echo, just the softest hint of laughter, like someone relieved, free at last. Jack looked toward the horizon, where the sun broke through the clouds in golden light. Shadow lifted his head, ears twitching. The breeze brushed past them, warm and alive, and for the first time in years, Jack felt something loosen inside him, a quiet peace, simple and complete. Raven Peak Lodge was gone, but its ghosts had finally gone home. He rose slowly, turned, his collar up against the wind, and began the long descent back toward the valley. Shadow followed close, their footprints trailing side by side until the snow reclaimed them both. Sometimes miracles are not thunder or fire. They are quiet whispers carried by the wind, reminding us that redemption is never truly lost. Raven Peak was never just a place of ruin. It was a mirror of the human heart, cracked, haunted, yet still capable of grace. Fear may break us, but faith rebuilds us, one prayer at a time. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Leave your thoughts below. Your words may lift another soul. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of hope, loyalty, and the unseen hand of God. May the Lord bless and protect all who listen, and may His light guide you through the storms of life until peace finds you again.